Devin Heron, artist and framer at Ziegler Art and Frame, joining us from Tulsa.
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to do this. I've had a pretty difficult time figuring out the best way to do it over Zoom, and I, made a PowerPoint presentation, tried to screen share it last night with a friend. Nothing was working, so please bear with me if I wanted to have a lot more visuals. We'll see if they work. Maybe they won't. Also, yeah, my phone just wasn't uploading half the pictures I took. But we're going to go through with it anyway and do our best. Please, yeah, feel free to ask any questions for clarification. Just to let you know a little bit about me, my name's Devin. I'm an artist in Tulsa. I graduated from UCO with my fine arts degree, so little familiar with OVAC, and I got to participate in Momentum the last year I was there. It was a lot of fun. So this is really exciting for me to be able to help them out since it's been so great. I've been framing professionally for 4 years now. And if you don't know anything about Ziegler's, it's like a family-owned business. It was established in '73. It's been around for a long time. So it's very dear to Tulsans. A lot of people have come through with like their grandparents. I went, yeah, with my grandfather to buy art supplies when I was younger, and I work with a lady now who remembers me, so it's very dear to everyone's heart, and it's really a great place, and we really do try to help out our local artists. We have like 20% off framing discounts if you're ever interested, just for like art for resale if you are an artist or a designer of some sort. And yeah, so I'm happy to help you with everything. We're just going to start with basic matting. So I made a video. Let's see here. And does everyone have the handout, the outline, basically? Crystal, is that something we sent out? Okay, just making sure. So let's see here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can screen share this at all. Maybe not. All right, so one important thing, say if you are trying to figure out what size opening to cut your mat. Just gonna wing it. Say we have a nice photo here. It's an 8x10. All right. If you were to cut your window opening an 8x10, the picture would just fall out, right? So you want to make sure that you bring it in the dimension 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So when you cut the mat, it would be 7 3/4 by 9 3/4. And that's just to ensure that you have a little 1/8 of an inch all the way around that's going to be secured behind the mat. A lot of you probably already know these things, very simple. So once you have your mat, you'll use your artist tape. This is like your most basic artist tape, archival. You can get this at Ziegler's or whatever art store. Uline is good. And you basically hinge it to the back here. You want to make sure it's really well connected. And once you have your mat, the opening will go around this. See if I have anything. Got a lot of random junk. Let's see. And you just adhere that here. So if later I am able to actually upload all my videos and put it in the presentation like I intended to, I would love to share this with you. I have a full video of me doing this part. I was able to get a video of the installation. So I think if we can do that, I'm going to try and screen share. If this is not working at all, please let me know. So let's see here. Okay, so this is basically a speed run of me doing an install in a basic poster frame that you can get at our store. These are convenient if you're just needing something. It already has the points in the side there. I'm kind of looking for something to pull them up. They'll rip out your nails if you try to bend them yourself. So these points are bendable. They make it a little easier for demonstrating install. It is really spiffy if you can afford to buy your own point driver. It basically will staple everything in place, and you can basically install any art easily that way. So at this point, I've already cut the mat, and I don't think I've quite been able to, let's see, completely hinge it yet. And in this case, the artwork was a little bit larger than a mat. So I'm just going to trim the sides here in a second. And so if, if say you've never matted your artwork before, the main reason you'd want to is just to create that border around your art to draw your eye in. You don't want your frame or your mat to overpower whatever artwork you're trying to show, and you want to make it look professional. And that's always going to elevate your artwork from looking, more like a poster just stuck in a frame to fine art is if you have that mat around it. I think for galleries, it's usually better to stick to something kind of neutral when it comes to your matting options, framing, and let's see here. A lot of places or some galleries will have specifics with framing, but usually, it's whatever looks good. With this one, I'm just going with the basic black. I feel like that'd be a pretty standard frame for what you choose for a gallery. Probably want to stay away from anything super ornate. If you're doing contemporary work, however, if you have some old style work and you want like a Philbrook museum style frame, that's fine. So there you can see where I was just basically adhering the tape to the back of the print and the mat board. And you really want to make sure it's nice and secure, or else your art will fall out of the window there. And so now that we've got that all attached, got our backing, and I did this at the end of the day, so it was really just trying to, give you a good example. At this point, I'd usually clean the glass first, but just for demonstration's sake, I went ahead and just put that in there for you. And there you can see pushing down the points made it easy. I wanted to give you an example of what the point driver can do. So that in my hand is the point driver. And so basically that's how it staples in. That is going to be the best, most professional way that you can basically put your art in there. If you don't have that lying around, then you can use like turn buttons. Some people will even they used to staple the artwork in, or just nail it in too. At that point, you kind of run the risk of maybe damaging your frame or art if you're, hitting it with a hammer trying to get the nails in there. So point driver is going to be the best. What I just pulled out there was the, see, this is an ATG gun, and it's basically just adhering double stick to the outside of the frame. So what the goal is here is we are going to cover the back of the frame with some paper, usually brown or black is the standard. And that is just going to definitely be, it'll make you look so much more professional when you bring in your art, is to have have some sort of dust cover on the back, and the appropriate hanging gear. So you can use any double stick tape. For this part, this ATG gun is definitely a good investment. It's, you could also buy archival double stick tape. Once again, I was in a hurry, so I didn't even remove those staples. So yeah, this is like definitely the fastest foolproof way. Here, if it was double stick tape, you just lay it on and just try to line up your paper. So for something this size, we'll probably just use basic D-rings for hanging, and I'll have a visual for that here in a second. So you want to make sure you'll get your paper nice and flat, line it up at the edge. I feel like every framer uses a different tool or a different technique for trimming the paper. I prefer to use just a flat razor. I think it gets the cleanest edges, and that's important. Like, might as well not even worry about putting the paper on there if the edges are going to look terrible, and you can cut your frame. So you definitely, I'm doing it kind of quickly because I've done it a billion times, but you want to go slowly. I've also used an X-Acto blade for this. I would recommend leaving about maybe 1/8 of an inch or less of the inner frame showing, just so when you hang it on the wall, you don't want any of that paper sticking out in any sort of way. So with canvases, sometimes it's okay to not have the paper. Once again, if you're going for the full professional gallery look, I would recommend putting paper on the back if at all possible. So what I was doing there is when you go to put on your D-rings, your hanging, you want to have your D-rings or hanging gear 1/3 of the way down from the top of the frame. And that is going to ensure that, your frame isn't hanging off too far, and we'll talk about the wire. You don't want it to pull off above the frame or anything. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm measuring the full height of the frame, and then I'm mathing it out, dividing it by 3, and just marking that. I've got my awl. That's going to help. You can, it'll help your screws go into the frame a little easier. Of course, if you don't have an awl, you can just jam those screws in there somehow. And then I don't have a screwdriver, so my coworker's gonna help me with that. There we go, got the drill. So, like I said, I'm going to be using the single hole small D-rings and just like a 3/8 inch screw. And for your basic poster style frame, like what we're using, that'll do just fine. And it's going to hold it in. And you want the D-ring facing inward since we'll be wrapping the wire around. So we secure that. Whoop. And I've got butterfingers. So for larger pieces, you would want to use D-rings with multiple holes. We also, have other brackets for thinner frames that I'll show you a visual here in a moment that will provide extra support. So the main goal is just to choose something that's going to make sure when you take it to the gallery, it's not going to, basically the frame's not going to reject the screws because it's so heavy and it'll just fall right off of the wall. So this is basically your standard technique for wiring D-rings. And I think this is a common mistake that can really affect how, your frame is going to lay on the wall. And I've helped install a few shows in my lifetime now, and it's incredibly frustrating to have to rewire everybody's work. So I know this seems like such a simple thing, but it is very important, and it's going to make you look very professional if you can do it. So what I'm doing is just running this through and tucking it under and running it through that way, and then wrapping it around. So if you were to only, put it under once and then wrap it, it's not going to be so very secure over time, the way that the glass would tug at the wire, and it could eventually come loose and your frame could fall off the wall, which would not be a good look, right? So, okay, this part is kind of how, oh, my nails are bad. I would recommend getting the right tension on the wire. So I pull the D-ring facing straight up and then kind of hinge it when it's in that position to wrap it around. And that's going to give you enough slack to be able to actually, maybe get your hand behind the frame in order to put it on the hook carefully. And, if it's too tight, you're not, whoever's hanging it won't be able to hang it on the wall properly. If it's too loose, it's going to be sagging off the wall. The top's going to be just all over the place anyway. So that's the proper amount of slack that you would want there. Once again, wrapping around, you want to make sure you have plenty of wire at the end. So if you only have, maybe let's say I don't know, let's say a quarter of the amount of what I had there, it could very possibly, oh, there we go, come unraveled. So you just want to make sure it's nice and secure. And I'm gonna turn off screen sharing for just a moment while I prepare the other things. I know that was kind of fast, but that's gonna be your basic mounting with tape. So you could buy a mat cutter if you wanted. Some people like to do that. I would just definitely recommend using your local frame shop as a resource. We have this really cool giant machine. You just enter in the dimensions, it cuts it. It takes like a minute, and it's always going to be nice and clean. If you are an experienced mat cutter, then go for it. But I would think it probably, just knowing how annoying it can be to have to cut mats, especially with multiple openings by hand, it's always, I think, a good investment to just have a frame shop do it. And so if you're not cutting something with an opening in a window, you may want to top mount your artwork. So in that case, what our standard would be, here's one that I've done. Here, I've got a little example. Got this tiny little Polaroid, and I put it in a larger frame. It's a little dramatic, but I thought it was cute. So here, I use that ATG gun, the double stick gun, to just put a couple strips here, center it in the window, just pop it on. I would only really recommend top mounting for things that have finished edges. So if you've got some artwork and maybe the image is going off the side a little bit, maybe you need to crop it in, or, the white border around it isn't even, it's not going to look very professional if you top mount it that way. So nice finished edges. You could always decal the edges. You go through with a razor, and you could intentionally make the edges look a little roughed up. That's kind of a nice look too. And this is, mostly just for 2D sort of work. And once again, this frame is green, but simple white matting, I think, is nice. Usually I wouldn't mat something with this wide of a border, but as you it makes you curious. So if I was to, put a tiny frame like this on the wall, it might disappear. But, if you're walking up to this, you might think oh, what's that? It'll draw you in. That's the whole point of matting, is to, just basically draw your eye in, give it that visual space that your art needs to breathe in order to make it look nicer and just look professional. So yeah, you can use any sort of double tape for that, or double-sided tape for that. They also sell hinging tape. If you're wanting to go archival, you don't want to use, anything that it might damage it. So the thing with the artist tape, it, you know, it can most of the time come off pretty easily, but if you have something like on parchment or a more fragile paper, if you ever have to reframe it, or let's say you set it into the onto the mat and you realize it's not the right position, when you go to pull it up, it might rip it. So that's when you want to go for more of your kind of archival, like paper, Japanese hinging tape. And I think I pulled up a little, let's see here. Here we go. Just because to have a visual, I think would definitely help you with this. Let me screen share this real quick. Thank you for your patience. I've never done this before. I've facilitated classes, but yeah, not on Zoom. So here, I'm going to share the screen. All right. So this here. Okay, so this is basically your paper hinging tape, kind of what it would look like if you were to go buy this in the store. And this is like a basic way of adhering it. And so you're basically taping down the other piece of the tape that is sticky onto its backing. And this type of tape can be removed if you needed to. Another thing you could do is you can use, let's see here. You can use photo corners. If you don't know what those are, they're just like the little clear plastic corners that would your artwork would slide into to hold it in place on the mat. And that's just if you don't want to use any sort of tape, any sort of adhesive. You want to go all archival. You want to make sure you can get that out later. If somebody didn't want it in the frame, you could just sell the artwork itself. So photo corners are good. You want to make sure, they're nice and sturdy. They sell them in different sizes, different colors. I'd say clear is usually the best. There are also mounting strips. It's kind of the same idea there. I think I might have some of those around. Maybe not. Oh, well, basically the same idea as photo corners. So instead of, the photo corner covering that, say the mounting strip is going to be more of a strip. It's kind of like a, let's say, a clear, it's a hot dog style sort of thing. You can basically attach it to your mat or on the backing there, and it slides in like this, and it's it can just cover a little bit, and then from there you can place your mat on top. Underneath you won't even see it, but it's not using any sort of glue. It's just basically a plastic holder in its place there. So let's see here. So let's see here. With floating all your works on paper, I just saw the chat, Virginia. So I'd recommend a archival, like acid-free glue. And you really just want a tiny, tiny bit of it. So if I were to, use my acid-free glue here, I just take a little dab, boop, boop, maybe one in the center. You don't want to glob it on at all. And then, place it down, maybe put a piece of glass or something flat on it so it has time to dry that way. That's probably the best glue to use if you want an archival sort of, top mounting. Also, they, like I said, the acid-free double stick tape. You know, that's just the importance of acid-free is that a lot of tapes are, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen like an old crusty frame, if you open it up and the tape's yellow on the back and it basically just like flakes off. Or if you see a mat and it has that, you know, it looks like the inside, the bevel of it is kind of turned into like a orangey brown color. So that is the acid coming through the mat. And now we have the technology to have acid-free mat boards, adhesive. It's going to make sure that your, you know, your art's not going to turn yellow over time because, you know, that the tape with the acid in it is going to end up staining your paper over time. So I think that same brand that I showed you had the hinging tape. Let's see here. It's Lineco is the brand. They have really nice acid-free, let's see if I can look up a picture of it. Acid-free glue. But yeah, the key is to just not use a ton of it. And so if you, hold on, let's see here. I'll probably just send it later once I finally get all those videos put together. So I think that that's pretty good when it comes to just your basic 2D art. So if you're working with mixed media, you've got all this crazy, I don't know, maybe some fabric on there, or, you know, you've got your paper and then you have paint on top of it. So one thing I, you know, never recommend is putting glass directly on your paint, unless it's like watercolor, something that's going to sit completely flat. If you have anything like acrylic, especially oil, never put any glass on there. Basically anything, if it's like got some heavy glue, let's say you put like a matte medium all over it to kind of adhere it all together. It's over time, especially in Oklahoma with the humidity, the glass will stick to your artwork. It will stick to the paint. If you ever take it out, it's going to remove the paint with the glass. It even does that for old pictures sometimes too. So what I'd recommend are spacers, and they are just like these thin little sticks that basically create some space in between the frame and the glass. And that's going to ensure that the glass isn't there. And that's, you could also use matting to do that. So if you have a matte board that's thick enough to where it's going to lift the glass up off the artwork, I think you would be safe there. I think I might have, I'm going to take you to my living room and show you an example of when I've done with that. Get a little house tour here. At least it's not super messy. So this is a drawing I bought from my friend Ben Stuckey. It's really cool. It's got cats on it. And whoop, here you can see I've kind of floated it on some foam core to kind of give it that shadow. I really, really hope you can see this. And in the corners, let me bring you around here. I never thought I'd be showing this to a bunch of random people on the internet. Okay. So in the corners here, kind of hard to see, there is basically a shadow box strip. So if you're familiar with shadow boxes, it kind of has the same effect as spacers. Spacers come with like their little piece of plastic, and they come with adhesive that you can just stick on there. So that it'll just raise it. And that's just important if you like that top mounted look, but you have something textured on there or something that would definitely get damaged by any glass on it. So that one is a good example. I think I've got, let's see. And let's see. Okay, so I'm just gonna skip forward to things that don't need glass, don't need mats. So that would be your basic canvases. Anything on a panel would be pretty safe. Let's see. I keep trying to find examples. I thought maybe my PowerPoint would work, but no. So if, let's say you have a painting and maybe you don't want a frame around it, it is okay to present it to a gallery without a frame. I'd say maybe paint the edges, make sure your edges are clean, or make it look intentional. So if you have something dripping over the edges, you know, make it part of the art. So it wraps around maybe. And with photography, sometimes people post, you know, print on canvas or things like that. You can, you know, maybe just have like either a black or just white border. I think white, black, whatever color, it's, you know, as long as it's uniform, it looks clean, it would be okay. Another thing that's pretty nice is a float frame. And those also would require a finished edge. Let's see if I have some of these pictures I can pull up that actually ended up saving. Oh, looks like some of the pictures I tried to upload like 3 hours ago finally showed up on there. Okay, let's see if I just open this. Bear with me one moment. Okay. You guys are the best. Thank you for being so patient. We're all learning here. Okay. All right, this isn't the best way I wanted to present it, but let's see here. Hopefully you all can see this. All right, so this is something we had hanging at Ziegler's. Can you see it? Thumbs up, yeah? Good, okay, cool. That's something we had hanging at Ziegler's, kind of an example of something with finished edges, I think would totally be fine to hang in the gallery. Oh, hey, there's a example of a float frame. It's a kind of terrible, not centered image. So here you can see there's a little bit of space. It's like a 1/4 inch of what we would call float space here. And in these frames, yeah, the canvas is just really sitting in it. It's a really nice, thin, contemporary look. That's a really nice professional way to show your art. Let's see. Okay, trying to see what I have here. So what I showed you earlier were the D-rings here. So you have your like basic 1 hole that we used earlier. They have some with multiple holes. So the larger the frame and the heavier the art, you really want to go with basic more holes, just to make sure that it is secure. And multiple screws is going to make sure that, you know, your frame's just not going to rip out, you know, from the screw and the wire on the wall. And you also consider the depth of, or the thickness of the wire that you're using during that. So here we've got these brackets. These are best, if you can see my mouse here, for thinner frames. If you imagine basically like applying them vertically on the frame and then having the wire run this way. So that if you have a thinner frame and you put one of these on there, you might be able to see the D-rings from the side. So brackets like these are great hanging methods. Oh, and then here's me displaying some museum glass. It's something you can think about. It usually costs a lot more, but we have, you know, at Ziegler's or whatever frame shop, you might consider putting some protective glass on your artwork to make sure it's not going to fade. If you really want something with the best clarity, museum obviously is the best. So actually, I think the video. Oh no, that's not the mat cutting video. So, oh nope, I don't want to watch that. So here, took a picture in this ridiculously large mirror that we had in the back. I'm really just trying to present the things that I had. It's my, I don't know, something was going on with my internet. I think my phone's like really, really outdated and bad. So the pictures I took on my phone really weren't uploading onto Drive for me to put it on here, and it was terrible. So just for scale, this is a giant mirror, I think definitely close to maybe 70 inches, and they use the 3-hole D-ring facing up. So in this case, would not recommend a wire. So I don't know if you've ever tried to hang a mirror before. They're crazy heavy. Mirrors are heavy, and or anything big with glass is going to be heavy, and we usually would not recommend wire at all. So in this case, you put 2 D-rings on the sides, and then they'd be able to hook it with 2 hooks here. I haven't been keeping track of time, so I hope, I should probably wrap up soon. So that's a good one. Metal frames really come in handy, especially if you're just wanting something easy for you to do at home. I would recommend that. So let me switch my video here. Ooh.
Kevin, just to give you one check, you have about 10 minutes. So
okay, great, thanks. That will be perfect. I was trying to switch my camera view. Oh well, I'll just move my laptop. So I did have a let's see, a metal frame at home, just to kind of give you a basic display of this. So these are pretty good. They're easy to switch out. So if you just want to make it easy and buy like 1 frame once and switch out your artwork, these are pretty sweet. All you need is a flathead, you know, to loosen these. Hopefully you can see all this. And it just slides right out. That, and yeah, you just slide your artwork in. So, you know, if you are kind of stressed out about, you know, cutting, joining frames and all that, you don't have to worry about that. And these are really just held in with these really spiffy springs. So, and they just push them in here. And you want to make sure you put enough in to have like an even amount of tension all the way around. Otherwise, yeah, when you go to move it, maybe the glass will slide out or break, things like that. There's also very specific hanging hardware for metal frames, kind of looks like this. Same idea with putting it a third of the way down. Make sure you have enough wire there to take care of that. Let's see. Those are super straightforward and simple. So I had some pictures for install on the back. We'd usually use, let's see. They called me a hoarder when I kept all this hardware, but it's coming in handy. Offsets. So these are pretty spiffy if you're needing to install your float frames, your canvas, and whatever frame. It's basically screws into the frame and into the wood of the canvas around it. I just don't know that I have any float frames around right now, but let's see here. if some of my pictures worked for that. Nope, well, I took all sorts of pictures, but let's see here. If I can kind of give you a visual, I'll try to maybe draw it out. That's always fun. So let's say I've got, I'm gonna find an example for you for it's the last thing I do. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to use this little frame. Imagine this is a canvas, all right? So I've got my little frame here. The canvas would fit inside, and then you'd have all this space here where the canvas might fall out, or maybe your canvas is thick and it's going to like stick out far from the frame and just be really, and it'll stick out from the wall. If there's some of that, it's okay. That's where you would take your offset, screw it into the frame, and then it would hold the canvas in place. And I hope that is enough of a visual to kind of hold, let you know what it is. It's going to hold it flat against the lip here. So in the case where it's thinner, let's say maybe you just have something on like a thin piece of masonite or something, and it's recessed in the frame, you do the opposite. So push that in there, screw it in like that. So that's how you would just do basic installs. And these are all things that, you could definitely do at home and make your work a little more presentable. So with the pieces that are sticking out from the frames, it's a little more difficult to put paper on it, but I definitely recommend it so people aren't seeing when they, in the gallery, they're not seeing all this hardware and raw canvas edge there too. Whenever it's recessed, maybe it's not as important to have the paper. Either way, I'd recommend it. Makes you look nice, professional. Let's see. Is there a weight-based formula for selecting which D-ring size or hardware? There's not an actual formula. I'd just say, just err on the side of caution. I think if something's like, maybe too well mounted, nobody's going to complain. But let's see here. I'd say something that is maybe 24 by 36. It's kind of hard to visualize right now. I would say that's probably the limit, something with like a matte and glass, that's probably the limit I would use the single small D-ring. Anything larger than that, I think, it would, if you have a deeper frame, you could even just use a deeper screw too. And then just up from there. So if you're having something that's like maybe, let's say 4 feet square with glass, that's whenever I'd say maybe don't put a wire on it. Even 3 feet, you could probably put a heavy duty wire, but once you're getting around that size, you want to use the multiple screws, heavy duty wire if you need it. Usually with really large pieces of glass, it also gets expensive, and mirrors too, if you were to ever, I don't know, paint on a mirror or something. But that hurts whenever it falls off the wall because it's, hundreds of dollars. Lawrence, you have a really cute cat. So yeah, I wish I could give you an exact weight, but I've never actually, taken like a frame and put it on a scale. So I don't know, but if you pick it up and you go, ugh, then maybe the wall is also going to be like, I don't know about this. You might want to use, oh yeah. So yeah, then you have your 2 hooks to hang from here rather than the wire. So if you have, just to kind of give you a better understanding of it, if you have all the tension here on a really heavy frame, it's going to put a lot of tension here. These are just going to pop right out, fall off the wall, So if you have these vertical ones here, you've got the 3 screws at appropriate depth, and then you have a wire, maybe, the preparator would probably know, oh, maybe I should use two hooks too. This is helpful if you ever hang things too, especially with longer, larger pieces. So I'm gonna check the outline. I don't know if there's anything I'm like completely skipping over. But let's see. And then when you go to drop off, I would say maybe bring it in some sort of protective barrier, like either a plastic sort of bag wrapping, or they sell like the plastic wrap on a stick, or you can put the like paper corners over it. You just want to make sure it gets there in one piece, and it makes it a little easier for the preparator to hang it, and especially if it's like really 3-dimensional, anything that it'll just make it, a little nicer on them. And those are things that I think, gallery owners will remember. People who hang your art, they'll be like, oh, their artwork's cool, but they just don't know how to properly present their artwork, and it really does kind of affect your professionalism that way. So see, the last thing I was going to mention, I guess, is just Z-bars and French cleats, and that is just for the pieces that are really heavy. If you're having, let's say you have a really big piece that, I don't know, maybe you made out of wood and it needs to be mounted to the wall, and something that's going to require like finding studs and all that. And I did snag a little visual from Trent's thing he sent me from last year that I thought really came in handy for French cleats. Here we go. And I will share this. This will be my last thing. Hold on. Here we go. So I guess the difference between French cleats is you can actually build a French cleat out of wood here, and it's basically like a puzzle piece. If you were to screw this little piece into the wall, and then you have this piece anchored to your artwork, it could slide in, and then once again, it's distributing that weight. It's going to make it a little more sturdy. You don't have like certain points of tension where something might fall off the wall. And then Z-bars, they're like a metal version of that. That's a little more common. We sell these at Ziegler's, and you just cut them to size, and you see the screw holes, so usually it's for larger pieces. You've got your, I don't know, this is my Z-bar right now. Your Z-bar, it's maybe, I'd say probably at least 2/3 of the width of your frame or whatever you're hanging, and you have all these different screws in there that is going to make it nice and strong. And then you have the exact same thing on the wall, and it just slides in. You don't have to worry about somebody bumping it over. It's like a little more secure, and it's really would be unnecessary for anything smaller, but for larger pieces that are really heavy, I'm pretty sure that preparator would really appreciate you having that already installed, so they don't have to go out of their way to do that. So and I will provide like Ziegler's number. Even if you aren't in Tulsa, you just would like some advice, we are so happy to help you with any sort of mounting advice, and if you can give us the dimensions of whatever you have, that's really going to be able to help us help you. And that place is unlike Michael's or Hobby Lobby. It's really run by just a lot of artists and people who have been there for, like, some people I think have been there since the 80s, you know, and then, or, you know, younger folks have worked there like 15 years, you know, a lot of experience. I definitely, yeah, come by. So yeah, that's my thing. If there's anything I forgot, let me know. If you have any questions, let me know, but I'm good here.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much. And yeah,
You're
if you
welcome.
want to send us any of your stuff later, we'll definitely send that out to the group.
It will.
And something you said that I thought was really great was protecting your work when you're dropping it off, having it in a plastic sleeve or something like that. I can say from working in a gallery, it's really helpful if you label your stuff. So if you bring it in a really nice protective thing and you want that protective thing back, a lot of artists will tape like one of their business cards to it. Also on your Z-bar and your cleat, it's also really helpful because sometimes when you're doing juried shows and you have work from 40 different artists, it's really nice to be able, I mean, certainly the packing material, there's no way, you know, you're able to get it matched back to the artist unless you have it like really nicely labeled. So I was glad that you brought that up on how to make sure it's protected when you get it to the place. Okay, so thank you so, so much again for all of that. Really great information. I know I learned some things too. And with that, we will pass it over to Trent Lawson, who is artist and chief preparator at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. And actually one quick Zoom tip for those of you that might be kind of new to Zoom. In the top right corner under view, you can click speaker view and it will blow up the image of who's speaking. So especially if there's like images or things like that that might be helpful for you. Okay, on to you, Trent. I wonder if he's frozen. Maybe I'll try sending him a message, but in the meantime, does anyone have any questions for Devin? We can go ahead and squeeze in a Q&A here. You can either unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can put it in the chat, either way.
I've got a question. Regarding float frames for canvases and stuff, would you say a table saw is essential if you're like building it yourself?
I would probably say so. So I don't actually do a lot of the joining there. So you're thinking about, let's see, because we sell length pre-made float frames. I have a feeling Trent would probably be able to help you with as far as like building frames, since he's good with like building crates and things like that. Yeah, otherwise I can't really think of any good way to be able to cut wood at home to build your own frames. But oh, Trent's back on. You should ask him. I think he'd be really helpful with that.
Thanks, Devin.
So you're asking about tools for to make your own frames?
Yes.
I mean, you're gonna basically need a miter saw of some sort, whether that's a powered one or they sell, ones where you can clamp it in and use a hand saw. Some people prefer like
so I've got a miter saw.
like with the hand one.
No.
Okay. Yeah, so generally you just want to probably get one that has a lot of teeth for a smoother cut, and then practice. Like something's going on with this video webcam. Keeps Kevin this pop-up saying the audio stopped working. So I guess if that happens, I'll just unplug it and plug it back in. Anyway, so yeah, so like I've been messing around, hanging shows around Oklahoma for a while, and then I guess in July, I'll be at the Oklahoma City Museum of Art for 10 years. I'm the chief preparator, and preparator is basically a made-up museum word that means preparing things for exhibition. So that's painting walls, matting, framing, building pedestals, and my video cut out again. And then the actual hanging of the work. So anyway, so I don't know what's going on with this webcam, so I'll just try to just jump into it. So yeah, so like I'm going to be mainly talking about making crates and you know, getting your stuff prepared to send off somewhere. Okay. Does the screen sharing still work even if I'm my video stopped? I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Yes. Sorry, I was giving you thumbs up and head nods. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, so I'll just not worry about the video then. Okay, so so first I'll just go over some materials that I'll be referencing. So these are different versions of what basically is like cardboard. So it's like 2 sheets of material with like a fluting in between. So at the bottom, there's like single wall, double wall cardboard. You can also buy triple wall cardboard, and it just makes things stronger. Blue board is like an acid-free cardboard. So if you're making like storage boxes or things like that, you know, you can use that there. Or sometimes, you know, blue board and coroplast could be good like backing materials for the back of your frames. And coroplast is basically a plastic cardboard, but it's like a neutral inert material. So it's generally the nicest because it provides a bit more like puncture resistance. So if you do use it, it's less likely to something to break through it like cardboard, and it also will block moisture. So that's all good things. And I think like you can get a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet for $11. So it's also still fairly reasonable priced. So and these are just different materials. Shelf paper could be good for glass skin if you're traveling glass, and I've got another slide about that later. General plastic sheeting.
Trent, I think we lost your audio.
Okay.
And you're back.
Yeah, everybody's having technical problems today. I don't know how many Zoom calls I've been on. This is the first time it's done this.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, and then there's Tyvek, which are good. There's kind of 2 types. There's one that's more like paper and one that's softer and more like fabric, but they are good. Like they don't easily tear, and they're also like a good like moisture barrier. They're also very smooth, and so usually they can be put in direct contact with your artwork or object, and which shouldn't, or it's at least not likely to scratch. Glassine is kind of like a fancy wax paper. So it's super smooth, and so like it can be in safe contact with your object, and it's a lot of times okay. There we go. So in glazing, if you're sending something off, generally acrylic is preferred because it's less likely to break, but it is more prone to scratches. So like if you're even cleaning it, like don't use a normal paper towel, use something like a microfiber cloth. But sometimes like you have to use glass. So if you're framing something that's like a friable material, so like a charcoal, pastels, things like that, the acrylic could have static, which would, like if you frame it like a pastel drawing with acrylic, it could lift the material off the paper. So that's when you would want to use glass because there's less static. And so when you're traveling glass, you need something like a glass skin that'll act as like a membrane. So that way, if something bad happens and the glass breaks, then the idea is that the glass skin keeps it together and makes it not scratch the artwork. And so then when you can replace the glass, you don't want to replace the artwork. So this is something that the like a low tack shelf paper could be used for a glass skin, or a lot of places like you can use blue tape. And in the diagram, like if you pull it up, which is wrong because that puts pressure on the glass, so you might accidentally break the glass taking the tape off. So that's why that diagram's there. So there's 3 basic types of crates: soft, hard, and hybrid, and they're all basically the same. It's just what the shell is made out of. So yeah, so they just to protect everything and padding and put all the markings you want on the outside that hopefully whoever's shipping it pays attention to. So when you're getting your work prepared, so usually you want to wrap it in plastic to create a vapor and dust barrier. It's polite to use colored tape, so that way whoever is unpacking it can see the tape. Because I think whenever you want whoever's like handling your artwork on the other end of the line, whoever's unpacking and repacking, you kind of want to keep them happy, because if you're doing something that's really annoying, then they might accidentally take it out on your artwork. I've seen clear tape plenty of times, and it's always annoying. And if you want the tape to be removed, like you can fold over one end to create a tab that then makes it also easier for them to remove the tape. And this is also, I guess, to follow up on framing, like if you're shipping a work, I mean, a frame's ultimate core job is to protect the artwork. And a frame makes that jobs easier. You can't always frame something, and I'll get up a slide about that later, but this is something that, like, if you have a, just a unstretched canvas versus a frame, like, because you wouldn't want all this plastic touching directly to your canvas. So you'll have to take a couple extra steps if you do the raw canvas that I'll cover later. So anyway, so you want to wrap it in plastic, basically like wrapping a Christmas present, and then generally we tape all the seams to, again, help to make sure dust or moisture doesn't make it inside. So ultimately the name of the game is your risk to, like, not to make as few risks as possible to your artwork. And depending on your level of risk, things are definitely going to get more expensive if you don't want any risk. And that's kind of what museums do. Like, they don't want to take any risks, so they spend lots of money on some of this stuff. So if you are doing a large piece that does not have glazing and you're concerned about the plastic sheeting dipping down and touching the surface, you can use something like, this is a twill tape, which is basically like a cotton ribbon. Twine or thing would work also, but it might be, a little harder on your frame, especially if there's decorations or gilding of some sort. Could be a greater chance of it rubbing. But yeah, like this is something you just tie, and then just tie a standard, bow knot, and then whoever's on the other end can untie it and retie it later. So soft pack, which is cardboard, so like a soft material. So here's some basic steps on like if you were going to make your own box out of a sheet of cardboard. At the top, there's this kind of knife that I found at Home Depot. I think it's with the sheetrock stuff, that the back end is really nice for doing this. If you don't have this kind of knife, like you can use the front of the cutting knife, just take the blade all the way in, because you want to just cut through one side of the paper but leave the other side of the paper intact, and you're kind of like knocking down or cut through the spines of that cardboard. And so this was to make a 12 by 15 by 2 box. You just kind of like measure it out and cut it and draw it, with a straight edge, and do all your stuff. And then I've got dotted lines on the parts where I cut. And so then you just basically fold it up. I left the tabs here on this one to kind of reinforce the corner. Like you don't necessarily have to do that, but it's something that can be easily done. And then when you're done, you can tape it up. Like you don't have to do this, but if you want people to cut the tape, you could draw a dashed line on there as an indicator of saying it's okay to cut here. Because sometimes it's not always clear, but it's part of making the other end of the job, like their job, easier. And so then you're going to want to pad it. Like on the left there is some different pieces of Ethafoam. That can get kind of pricey. Like you can use all sorts of stuff. I mean, styrofoam, I've seen people use like that pink insulation foam. Nowadays, there's more options. Like you've probably seen plenty of those airbags in Amazon packages. The Ethafoam is good because smooth, and so it mitigates vibrations and shocks to your artwork. If you're sending a piece that, that's like a photograph, other than coming loose from the hinge, like if you shake and bounce that around, it's not really going to hurt it. But something like a pastel drawing or glass or something like that, you might want to try to protect it from those bumps and things. Quick, easy method is like a bubble wrap collar. And so, I mean, bubble wrap's pretty available these days. If you get some of those rolls that are perforated, makes it really easy to tear strips. Then you can just kind of fold it around the edge of your piece, and then just kind of tape it, form a collar, and it'll do a pretty good, quick padding, get you through most places. If you're, and in this case, like if so on the right, how it's kind of open and then the box would close. If you like, if that was I'd probably put that face up and then maybe cut another piece of cardboard to just go in front as like another added layer. So that way, if something hits it, then it's less likely to break through. Because that could be something to think about if you're wanting to, you're on a budget, but you're trying to create something strong. If you take two pieces of cardboard and glue them together, but you cross flute it, so like the lines are going vertical and the other ones are going horizontal, that'll add strength, because so that way it's less likely to bend or buckle in either direction. And so if you're sending like lots of things, like you got a show somewhere and they're all framed in a similar size, you can send several things in one box. This is and so you'd probably still want to wrap them in plastic individually. They're not like this in this photo, but it's also good to, like, this is just thin sheets of foam and a sheet of cardboard is interleaving between each one. So now we can get on to a hard box. So this is something, so your artwork on the right, and it's padded and it's got spots for your hands to grab it out of there. And then on the lid, there are corresponding pieces to, so basically you're trapping that artwork away from all the sides, snug, but not too tight because you don't want people to force it in there. And you could say this is good to go and done, and it probably very well work. It kind of depends on, again, how much risk you're willing to take and maybe how far it's traveling. So, because in this case, if somehow it was in the elements and water got on it, like since that water will probably go straight into the inside through that seam, or if it gets dropped really hard and hits a corner, like this, has a greater chance of a joint failing. So like a way that a lot of crates do this is they add battens, so pieces around the edge to kind of reinforce all these joints. And so in this case, the same box now has battens around it. It's always good to have at least one, corner marked for registration, so that way people know which way the lid goes to the back. And with the battens, it's like on the right, that Z joint, and so that's illustrating. So if it was somehow submerged in water, like water will always defeat you, but you want to like basically make it to where it takes longer for the water to get inside. So the more times the water has to like turn to make it to the inside, the longer it's going to take. And so in that Z joint, it has to turn 3 different times before it gets into the middle of the box. I mean, I haven't tested it, but I've heard other art handlers have made a crate and like put it in a bathtub or something, or in the shower for, a long time just to see how long it would take. And it holds up pretty well. I mean, this is, kind of things on like worst case scenarios that you're trying to prepare stuff for. But ultimately, if water does get inside, your artwork has plastic wrapped around it. So it's again, like extra protection. So here's some diagrams on different kinds of ways of doing joints. And at the bottoms, there's some notes on which ones like are good or bad. I kind of put these in to like reference later, because I know like years ago when I went to one of these workshops, it was maybe 5 years later before I actually built a crate. So hopefully you can keep these files and reference them down the road if you're ever actually making one of these. So here's some diagrams on like outside, some things to think about. So you could, if it's a larger crate, it's nice to put kind of handles on the side so that way whoever is handling it could lift it up onto a dolly or tip it or something like that. Or maybe the skids at the bottom are high enough that a pallet jack can go under. So just different things to think about. And this is just different ways to lay it out. So here's a nice diagram of maybe what the side view of one of these are. And in this case, they took silicone or some sort of sealant to seal all the corners, of the crate, or at least the bottom, not the lid. So again, make it less likely that moisture makes it in. If you're doing a really big crate where like you might be needing pieces larger than 4 foot by 8 foot, these are different diagrams of ways to make strong lids and where to put your seams and cover them up with different battens. So this is a drawing of making a box out of like foam core or something. That could be good for short travels, or you could, if you're going to pack lots of things in like a big crate, you could build little small boxes that then slide into a larger crate to kind of uniform everything, different levels of protection. But this is a drawing. I mean, they made this case, whoever drew this is like foam core and duct tape. I don't know that I would recommend duct tape, but certainly like the rest of it, everything is a good idea. If you're doing an irregular shaped something, this is a way to pack that. And so this would, and it's again also a way of, you're doing something that's unframed, or maybe you can't grab it all the way around. But so they just made essentially a tray and cut those tabs. And something to keep in mind on this, like you can't just tape the tape from just the cardboard to the cardboard. The tape should go all the way around and stick to itself, because the tape likes to stick to itself more than it will stick to cardboard. So it's less likely that that tape would fail if you're going all the way around to stick the tape to itself. And then in this case, you could then make another kind of like a clamshell lid to go over the top of it, and travel this that way, or different methods like that. Here's some diagrams on good do's and don'ts on putting on how you put your foam in here. So it does a good job of like showing correct and incorrect and kind of like why that's good or bad. Just move on. So this is a hybrid crate. So it's a wooden border with Coroplast kind of like lid. It's going to be lighter and less expensive, but not as tough. But otherwise, pretty much all the same rules apply. Yeah, and then on the inside, like you could hot glue the Coroplast or use small screws. Yeah. So here's an example of like one that had like a Coroplast lid of like an irregular shaped piece. So this is wrapped in Dartec, and then the what's wrapped around. So then there's the soft Tyvek wrapped around, so covering the inside of that foam. So if you are going to wrap something in foam, you can just basically just cut a channel maybe like halfway or quarter of the way through, and then just kind of shove the, stuff the Tyvek in there, and it'll hold it in place really well. And so that way it's a smooth, so if it, vibrates like in transit to the front of that, like you want to make it sure it's as least likely as possible that it scuffs and scratches the artwork. So here's examples of packing more than one object of different sizes in the same crate. They built these trays that would pull out so that it's just a piece of cardboard. So this one, they just put a piece of cardboard here, and then they would put like another tray in front of it, and then they would put a piece of cardboard or something here, and then the lid. So here's the same idea of traveling frames of the same size in one crate. Here's some of like a top loading. In this one, the frames were the same size, but some were vertical and some were horizontal. So the vertical ones would go here and the horizontal ones here, and then there's another piece of foam that would go on the top of it here to, hold everything down. So now we'll start getting into some more kind of 3D-ish packing. So this one's something that's flat but complex, and so it's basically making one of those like portrait boxes from the other slide, but it's foam that they've cut around the shape. And so here's some, hand grooves to be able to grab the object to take it out. And so you can line the inside of all this groove with like soft Tyvek if you're worried about, if the edge of the foam might scratch your artwork. So here's some examples that I made. So this is just kind of like some cheap, it's kind of like mattress foam. It's a polyurethane. So, the yellowing and discoloration is evidence of acid and off-gassing over time. So each layer is numbered, and then this corner is cut off to act as a registration mark. So yeah, I just kind of put it down there and traced around. And with this one, since it's so soft, you can kind of just like pick it out with your fingers and your hands and just kind of tear it out, or use a knife. And then you can travel it this way. Something like this, you could probably if your object is sturdy enough, you could wrap the object in something and then put it in this cavity. And then, yeah, you just make a box to fit around this. Here's a different way to do the same object. So probably wouldn't normally use this many layers, but I did it to show concept. So there's just several layers of foam that, like, each one has been cut around to fit the shape. And then at this point, like, it's written like remove object. Of course, each one of them are numbered. And then there's the arrow saying, okay, put the face this way. So that way you know which way to line it up. So at this level, you would take the object out or load it in, and then you put the rest of them on. And then this box, you know, like, so you can make your box lots of ways. So this one, like, you can explode it out. So that way you can get at more pieces. And then it's just got a kind of a cap lid that goes on top of it. And then it's always good to mark, open this end, all that stuff. So here's another way. So this one has these little trays that like slide out on like a groove here. And so it'll fit around the more sturdy areas of the artwork. And if there's something that's really fragile that, you know, you don't want anything putting pressure against, then you can leave it in the air. Yeah, and it's lined with Tyvek where it goes, and then this top part would go down to like hold it down. So here's another drawing of maybe like a way to do a couple different ways to do vases. So this is like that guillotine pack where you do all the different slices around. In this instance, they use tissue paper wads to go down there, and then more than they have bubble wrap that folds over the top. Like artwork, there's lots of ways to do the same thing. It just depends on what you have time and resources for. Here's a real fancy way of doing like that same thing of the pieces coming out, and they've put like a drawer slides on this one, so the object would slide out of the bottom of the crate. So then you're not having to reach into the crate to lift out. Certainly not necessary, but it's fancy. But here's some examples of different works that have come through the museum. This one's plaster, and so like this area here was of course real fragile, so nothing's touching here, but then they slide pieces out here, and then these braces over by its head would be removable. Like you take these screws out, and there'd be more on the outside of the crate to take this brace out, and same for this one. And then you would try to reach in, or I can't remember if this one had a tray that slid out to get the object out of the crate. This is a travel frame. So it's just it's more for storage or short distance moves. You can wrap the outside in plastic or even tack on wood pieces to short up a little bit. But again, here's ways of, so like there's the padded braces just put in places to hold the object so it's not moving around loose inside the crate. Here's 3 different sculptures, like the idea of like where you would have like a big crate that holds smaller crates with individual objects. These were probably also in that big crate. These marks here with this, I think these might have been glued together, but this is a registration mark, so that way you know which order to go in from. And then they say, yes, remove this one first, and then indicating, yes, grab it here to pull. And so if you're traveling something that needs to be rolled up, whether a large canvas or quilts or tapestry or any, something, you can roll these on a tube and kind of have just travel it this way. You would just remove this part, slide it up, and then you'd be able to reach in and grab the tube. So when you're doing this, make sure if you are putting it on a tube, make sure there's a few inches on both sides of the tube to be able to handle it and put your braces and tie things off. But yeah, like this. So this would have been rolled up with an interleaving of some sort, probably Tyvek. And then at the end, it has a, I think it was a kind of fabric that was rolled around it. And then you use, this is twill tape to tie it onto places and then to be able to handle it, put it in there. So, and then I got a section on Chihuly boxes. So all Chihuly packing looks the same. They're always in cardboard and they look like this with these rope handles. And they get the job done with very fragile objects. So all the boxes are always double wall cardboard. I mean, I don't know if they still do this, but these are all Polaroids. These are all back from 2002, I think, whenever they acquired all the stuff when the museum was built. But it's nice to then go, okay, there's supposed to be 7 pieces in this box, and these are the different layers, so that way you know what things look like. Of course, these would all be shipping through like dedicated art handlers, shippers mainly. There's another school of thought of like never putting photos or indicating what's inside the crate in case someone then wants to steal it, because, oh, this has a cool art piece in it. Now that I know what it looks like on the inside, maybe I'll steal this. Anyway, but I mean, this could also be a note that's just at the very top of the box as soon as you open it. You know, and if you have any particular handling notes, how to hang it, how to handle it, like you can always include that information. And people, even if it's obvious, people appreciate it. So here's ones of kind of like a cavity. So they've, you know, did this. These are plugs that would be removable, that would fit the shape to hold everything in there between layers of foam. This is kind of like an expandable foam that fits the exact contours. This is probably the most expensive route, because you also have to be careful that if you're doing expandable foam, that it doesn't expand too much and break whatever you put in there. But then, yeah, I would have a plug that goes here, and then we'd close the box up. Then there's packing peanuts. It's a mess, but it works. So in these cases, there would be foam at the bottom. In this one, there's also little foam wedges to support it a little bit. Then you can just start dumping in packing peanuts. You can give it a little shake, and the packing peanuts will start finding pathways and going around the object. Then you can continue to fill it and give it a little shake until it's full. Close it up. Here's a variation on that. Like if it's not like a very intricate piece, you could get like small trash bags or something and fill them like about halfway with packing peanuts to make little pillows that will contour around, and you can kind of squish into around an object. Like it's a certainly less messy way to do packing peanuts. And searching around, like there are also some options for pre-made art shipping boxes that I found. They're basically like this. They would have a piece of foam at the top and bottom and another piece of foam in the middle that you would lay your artwork down and then trace the outside and then like cut the foam out, and then you would have a way of, in a fairly inexpensive way to package things there. And I've seen these at like a FedEx Kinko's of just like a, you know, it's kind of a cardboard, but it's pretty tough, kind of like cardboard thing that you just a crate, and then you would have to like customize the inside to fit whatever you needed. I think that's all I had on that. And so I know I rattled through that like really quickly. Let me see if my video will work. Okay. So I guess, yeah, so I didn't have a photo of it on the slide. So since I do velvet paintings myself, I know I can't like wrap it in plastic or do anything, because if I did that, it would crush the velvet. And so here's a way that you can do that. And I've done with mine is, so it's basically a float frame. So I made a tray of cardboard, and then you would put your artwork in there, and then you could screw it in from the back. And then you could treat this as your artwork, and you could wrap this with plastic, and then do everything else just like that. And if you don't want to just screw it from the back, alternatives to that, you could get like a flat L bracket or T bracket to screw into the back that would then be held in place. So you'd have like a wood backer or something that you would either screw the bracket into, or it maybe has a little bolt that you put in with a wing nut. Other options, they make these things called Oz clips that you would screw this into your art piece, and then this would go in the crate, and then whenever you take it out, then it folds up to close, so that way it stays on there. They also make them with rings on the top, so that way you could just leave it on and then actually hang it from the same hardware. So they're invented in Australia, so that's why they're Oz clips. They're definitely beefy, and they're probably a little expensive. They have them in a couple of different sizes for lighter weight stuff. So yeah, like are there, I guess, any questions or other things? Like, how long did that take me? About half an hour.
Yeah, we're right on schedule. So we have about 20 minutes for questions. Again, if you guys want to unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat either way.
Don't have tools. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're like most any kind of carpenter or woodworker could probably build a crate. If you're talking about, wooden crate like this one, like you probably need access to a table saw to be able to do that. I mean, I guess you could do it with a circular saw if you know what you're doing. And you can also contract things. It's again, like how much do you want to pay for it? So if you've got the money to spend, there's definitely people and art services. I can't think of one locally. I don't know if they're still around. There was, I think, a Craters and Freighters. I think another one was like, was it called just Fine Art Handling or something? There's not a big go-to one in the state. The Dallas area certainly has lots of them. I know the museum like buys crates from different art handling and art shipping companies. I mean, there are also sometimes, I mean, you can't necessarily count on it, but some places would, like a museum or place that has crates occasionally be like, hey, we're getting rid of all these crates if anybody wants to come pick them up. But you're at the mercy of what size those crates are. And if they're like ginormous, or, so then how much retrofitting do you have to do to make it fit your specific needs? So unfortunately, if you're talking about a wooden crate, ultimately your best is to do something somewhat custom or spending a lot of money. There's other companies, one's called like turtle boxes that are designed, and they sell these to museums, and the idea is that they're reusable for one, environmental reasons, so that way there's less waste going out into the world. And so they have a method where you can move some of the padding around and reuse these boxes, but yeah, they definitely get pricey. Brian, here you go. So it's just same with like with velvet. So like I don't necessarily have a diagram, but if you create a collar, whether that could just be either wood or even like cardboard. You could even just take pieces and fold it and then create a collar around it, so that you don't necessarily need like something in the middle. Like this could be hollow. Thing went out again. Yeah, and so that way, either through something like the Oz clips or L brackets that do the same thing, like if this was an L bracket that's just screwed to the back, then you could still have access to this to mount to something. And so that way, the idea is that your artwork is floating inside to a backer piece, and then anything plastic or padding wise is now touching your collar and not your artwork. But yeah, you just need to make sure that whatever you're doing, you feel comfortable that whatever is holding your artwork into your collar isn't going to come loose, because that would be your disaster scenario there, is if that came loose inside the box and it's just bouncing around. But yeah, I mean, I've shipped things like this with, I mean, I think I've even traveled 2 of them at the same time, just put them in a tray. And then you just put 2 of them in the same box, and then everything else is still the same. But yeah, you just need to make sure that nothing actually touches your surface, or as little as possible. Because yeah, with your paintings, there would be a concern about the whatever's wrapping it sticking to your paint, and you want to avoid that. I have heard scenarios of like that glassine, fancy wax paper can be used, which like in a worst case scenario, it sticks to the work. I haven't actually done this, but it's supposed to be dissolved in water. So that way, if worst case scenario, it sticks to something, you could take like a Q-tip and some water and then like dissolve the paper without hurting, hopefully, the artwork. Because that's the other thing about museums in general. Anything we do needs to be reversed that way. If we got a better idea or new technology, or we did something wrong, we can remove it without hurting the artwork. Because it's part of the, you know, the ethos of museums is protecting these objects for future generations. So it's gonna do no harm. I guess like other just general tips on hanging work. Ran across these at the museum. They're come in a box that just says mirror hangers, but these are nice because there's adjustable, so you can move this bolt up and down, so that way if you're hanging on D-rings and you get it off like a little bit, you can just adjust it instead of having to make more holes in your wall. But yeah, like anything else other presentation wise, guess if you're installing an exhibition, it's just like as you lay it out, you can think of it just like your artwork, and you're creating composition on the wall. A lot of times, like you can think about like a central point, like if there's a really big painting, maybe that goes in the middle, you know, or you put them in like smaller groups, like a group of 3 or 5, and then a space, and another group of 3 or 5. You know, and if you're doing sculptural work on a painted pedestal, be prepared to have a piece of mylar or plastic or something to be in between your art object and the painted deck, so that way you doesn't get stuck to the paint at the bottom. So I think that's pretty much all I got prepared.
I have a question for you, Trent. I just put it in the chat, but is there, I know if you're doing someone like Creators and Freighters or someone like that makes sense, but if someone were just to ship their artwork themselves, smaller pieces to an out-of-state show, for example, is there a carrier that you prefer, you've had better luck with?
I mean, I don't have a lot of experience. I've shipped a few things. Like the post office is always going to be the cheapest, but they have a limit to the size that you can ship. And so then you're going to need to do UPS or FedEx. I mean, I think ultimately they're the same. I know at least FedEx also has like an upper level of like a white glove shipping that is supposed to take better care of whatever they're doing. But again, it's how much you can afford to do. I mean, I've shipped, like a 24 by 36 painting in a, decently heavy frame, out of state, and just, wrapped it in plastic, bubble corner, collar, and then cardboard box. And it arrived there and back just fine. Because that's ultimately the kind of thing, like you can maybe even just put it straight in cardboard and with no padding, and it works great like 10 times, and then all of a sudden you get one time that gets crushed. And unfortunately, once it leaves your hands, there's only so much you can do. And so that's talking about like how much risk you're comfortable with. So I think if there are steps take to especially if they're relatively inexpensive, like wrapping it in plastic, putting bubble wrap, or even styrofoam. I know I've got like a pile of cardboard and packing from all the pandemic online shopping. I mean, you could even take small pieces of cardboard and make like small, like square tubes to act as padding around. Like it wouldn't stop very much vibrations, but it would act as a cushion. So like if something like hit it like on the edge, it would have to be a larger impact to make it all the way to the inside. So yeah, I mean, it's also, and it depends on what you're actually shipping. Like as the artist, you typically know your artwork more than anyone else on where it's strong, where it's weak, what its own special needs are. And so I think that's the way to approach, packing for things, is like, what are the unique challenges? Yeah, I mean, and sometimes like if you're doing works on paper and you don't need to frame them, or if you're able to, if it's cheaper somehow to travel the artwork separately from the frames, because you could get a box, and then, because if your paper could be sandwiched between sheets of cardboard or something and be very strong and stable and be relatively small, especially if there's several of them, and then send it someplace, and then either travel the frames separately, so then you could maybe like not do as robust of packing, because then you're not as worried about damaging the artwork inside the frame. And then if you have the ability to, or gallery or venue can, if they can assemble the frame packages on the, that could be another way to do that. Like I know at the museum, we reuse the same frames over and over again. So everything's just matted to, as much as we can, certain sizes, and we just take everything out and then store them flat in a box when they're not on display. So they're not all in frames. And then so if you are, an artist that can work in that way, or you tend to work in a certain format, you might be able to save on framing by just swapping out the guts. Or if you're doing a festival show or something like that, you can still keep things fresh with less expense until you actually sell it.
Does anyone have any other questions either for Trent or Devin?
I had a question for Devin. Earlier, I'm not sure if it was mentioned before, but is there a way that I can tell exactly how high up to put the D-rings on the frame?
Uh, yes. So you want to put it a third of the way from the top. So if you measure the entire height here and divide that by 3, then you can just put the marks there. And that goes with, whether you're using a wire or not, wherever the hooks would be. In general, you want it on, about a third of the way down.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great.
Any other questions?
I wanted to say something about what Devin said. When you are placing your wire on the back of paintings, and to stabilize the painting, it doesn't really have to be exact. But I've hung quite a few paintings that were maybe like a series of them that were all the same size, and the wire was not exactly in the same place on the back. So that means the nails in the wall have to be not exactly the same height up from the floor. So if you do happen to have several of the same similar size paintings and you do get it exactly a third of the way, it makes it a lot easier for the people hanging the art.
Yeah, I've gotten in the habit of all of my artwork that the wire goes 2 inches to the top of the frame. So that way when
That's
I'm
good.
hanging my own work, I know exactly where to put it without necessarily measuring.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any last questions? We can let you guys go a couple minutes early.
I guess there's one other tip we do at the museum. So if you are rehanging like the same work several times, or if you just want to make someone's job easier on the back end, like write the measurements on the back of the frame. So, so whether it's like up a certain amount to center, or the D-ring or the wire is this much down from the top and this far apart for D-ring. So then you can just look at the back, there's all my measurements, and I can put that directly to the wall.
Yeah, I like all your tips of how to make the people on the other side happy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the easier ways to distinguish yourself as a professional is when you think about what happens to this artwork once it leaves your hands. So, putting good hardware and like Devin had, as far as like wrapping the wire in a good way so it doesn't slip. All making it so that, because, as an artist or, framer or someone, like, how to handle all this stuff, but you're selling it to someone that may has no knowledge. And then how can you make their life easier?
Yeah, also packing lists, if you're putting multiple pieces in the same box, so when they open it, they know exactly what's supposed to be in there, and then they also know what goes back in that box.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, Crystal, making sure everything is marked with, all of the, make it as idiot proof as possible. Put your your name, title, any of that like kind of label text on the back. So that way, if something happens on the organizational side that they lose that somehow, or they've got several works by the same artist, then they know which one. And also, if someone buys it, 10 years down the road, they may have forgotten where they got it from. But if it's on the back and they're like, oh, who was that by? And then they could find you again if they wanted to get more work.
Yeah, I love that. I love it when artists include like their bio, but also like an artist statement about the piece. Because a lot of times, like when I buy art, I actually don't know who the artists are and have to do my own research. But if I were given like a little bit of information that's even tucked in the back of the frame, it's great for the buyers to be able to find you later.
I guess if you're thinking long-term enough that if your work ends up in a museum someday, that makes the curator's job and whoever has to research the piece, their job a whole lot easier, and also to get it more accurate if they're having to write about your work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a built-in kind of provenance to show authenticity.
Yeah, and all of that really does make an impression on the person that's unboxing your work of like, oh, wow, this person's professional. I want to recommend them or, you know, work with them again in the future. Okay, well, thank Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna make one more note because I realized there was something I forgot to mention just really quick. And that just kind of reminded me of like, because we're talking about D-rings and wire and something that I find like working in a frame shop too, and some people would just, you know, prefer a sawtooth on their frame, which usually for galleries, I really wouldn't recommend unless you have like an itty bitty piece. I mean, it is a little more difficult to get them straight. But also as far as like, you know, the weight of something, it's not as sturdy. Like we usually have just the hammer in ones. But like if you have a skinny frame that really can't like take a D-ring, like this is a good example of one. So yeah, it could take a D-ring, but then you kind of just see it from the front. I mean, it's difficult to get it on there without it coming out. So sawtooth, it could work. I'd usually recommend like a very small screw eye, and those will just screw in there, and then you can wrap your wire, and you're not going to see it from the front. So however, it does stick out, you know, from the frame once you have it in there. So you make sure you get a small enough one. And I mean, depending on the frame, it can be pretty sturdy. But yeah, those are just some other options too. I'm sure Trent has tried to hang things with like sawtooths, and it's not a lot of fun.
Hanging some of the early Momentums definitely had everything you've seen. Like I know there was one time there was a piece of MDF, like so, which is heavy wood, and they had these pieces of leather, which I found out later were guitar straps screwed to the back to hang it on, and we were hanging it on a crumbly stucco wall, and so I was like complaining about that in another year, and it was turned out the artist was my co-chair, and then I got to complain to his face. But yeah, I've seen lots of stuff like the wires that are too thin or telephone cords and the wires break. I know there was a Momentum in Tulsa one year that had those adhesive kind of loops with holes to hang things from on the back of a frame. And so we hung the work and we went in the next day and their piece was on the floor with the glass broken. And we were like, uh-oh. And then I look up and those plastic hangers are still on the nails on the wall. So it's like, oh, that's not on me. Because the adhesive failed because the piece would have been too heavy for that.
I think we lost Trinity.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask for advice with that. Like I said, you can call, you know, call me at Zickler's anytime if you need some extra advice on what to use too.
And some of the products will say on them what the weight limit is as a guideline if you're not sure too. So, okay, well, like I said before, I will send all of the participants everything, the other stuff that Devin was going to send. And then Trent, did you want to share your PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do
So
that.
we'll compile all of that as well as this video over the next week and send that out to you all. So you'll have that to kind of look back on in the future when you're ready to build your first crate. But I just want to say again, thank you so much, Devin and Trent, for sharing all of your wisdom. I know it's super helpful. Yeah. So thank you guys. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their weekend.
Thank you so much.